I was sitting in that courtroom, my hands shaking, listening to my older brother tell the judge with absolute conviction, "He deserves nothing, Your Honor. He manipulated our father, isolated him from the family, and stole everything that should have been ours." His lawyer had a mountain of documents, sworn statements from people claiming I was a manipulative son who had taken advantage of our elderly father. They were demanding the entire inheritance be nullified, claiming undue influence. My father's will, leaving everything to me, was about to be thrown out. 20 years of caring for him, of being there when no one else was about to be erased, until my lawyer stood up, walked to the evidence table, and dropped a small recording device that my father had left for me. What played in the next 7 minutes didn't just prove my innocence. It exposed a family conspiracy so calculating, so cold-blooded, that even the judge had to take a moment to compose himself. And what my father said in that recording, from beyond the grave, changed everything. If you've ever been betrayed by family or fought for what's rightfully yours, stay until the end of this story, because what happened in that Texas courtroom will leave you speechless. And subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell, because here I share the most incredible courtroom reversals. Real cases that sound like fiction. Now let me tell you everything from the beginning, because you need to understand who my father was, who I was to him, and what my brother really wanted. My name is Michael Patterson. I'm 41 years old, and I live in Austin, Texas. I'm a high school history teacher, married to my wife Sarah for 12 years, and we have 2 kids, Emma and Jake. I'm not rich, I'm not powerful, I'm just a regular guy who loved his father and tried to do right by him. My father, Robert Patterson, passed away 6 months ago at 78 years old. He was a retired mechanic who owned a small auto shop in Houston for 40 years. Not a millionaire, but he'd saved well, owned his shop building, had a nice house, some investments. His estate was worth about $2.3 million, and according to his will, written 3 years before his death and updated 1 year before, he left everything to me. Not a penny to my older brother David, 45, or my sister Linda, 43. Everything to me. When the will was read, David exploded. "This is fraud. Michael manipulated him. Dad would never do this," Linda cried, claiming I had poisoned Dad against them. Within 2 weeks, they filed a lawsuit contesting the will, claiming I had exercised undue influence over our elderly, vulnerable father, that I had isolated him from family, and that the will didn't reflect his true wishes. They hired Thomas Brennan, one of Houston's most aggressive probate attorneys, known for winning impossible cases. I hired the best I could afford, Elizabeth Morgan, a solo practitioner with 20 years of experience in estate litigation. She was honest from the start. "Michael, these cases are hard to win when you're the sole beneficiary and there are other children. The burden is on you to prove the will was your father's genuine wish. Do you have anything that shows he made this decision freely?" I told her the truth, that I did, that I had everything, that my father had prepared for this exact scenario. Let me take you back to understand how we got here. I'm the youngest of 3. David, the oldest, was always Dad's golden boy. Star quarterback in high school, went to business school, became a real estate broker, made good money, had the big house, the fancy car. Dad was so proud. Linda was the middle child, the princess, married a doctor, lived in the suburbs, had 3 kids, also someone Dad bragged about. And then there was me, the teacher, the one who chose passion over money. Dad respected it, but I was never the one he showed off. Our mother died of cancer when I was 16 in 2000. Dad was devastated. For years, he just worked and came home. David and Linda had their own lives, visited occasionally on holidays. I was still at home, finishing high school, then college locally. I saw Dad every day. We were close, but in that quiet way men often are. We didn't talk about feelings much, but we were there for each other. In 2015, when I was 28 and newly married, Dad had his first heart attack. Mild, but scary. David and Linda showed up at the hospital, stayed a few days, then went back to their lives. I was the one who went to all the follow-up appointments, made sure he took his medication, changed his diet. Dad noticed. He told me one day, "Your brother and sister have their lives. I get it. But Michael, you're always here. I appreciate it more than you know." Over the next few years, Dad's health declined slowly. Another heart incident in 2017, diabetes diagnosis in 2018, mobility issues in 2019. Each time I was there, Sarah and I would have him over for dinner twice a week. I'd help him with house maintenance. We'd watch football together on Sundays. David would call maybe once a month. Linda would visit every few months, usually asking Dad to babysit her kids or for money to help with something. In 2020, Dad decided to sell his auto shop. He was 75, couldn't work anymore. He sold it for a good price, which significantly increased his estate value. That's when things started changing. Suddenly, David and Linda were very interested in Dad's finances. David started suggesting Dad invest in his real estate ventures. Linda wanted Dad to put money in her husband's medical practice expansion. Dad politely declined both. He told me privately, "They never cared about my money before because they thought there wasn't much. Now they smell it." In early 2021, Dad's dementia symptoms started. Forgetting names, repeating stories, getting confused about dates. His doctor diagnosed early-stage Alzheimer's. It was heartbreaking. I moved him into our guest room so Sarah and I could care for him full-time. It wasn't easy with 2 young kids and my teaching job, but we managed. We hired a part-time nurse for when I was at work. David and Linda were furious. "You're isolating him. You just want control of his money." They demanded he move to a facility where they could monitor the situation. Dad still had good days, and on one of them he was very clear. "I'm staying with Michael. He's the only one who's ever really taken care of me. You two just show up when you need something." That's when Dad updated his will. In March 2021, with his lawyer James Crawford present, along with 2 independent witnesses, Dad signed a new will leaving everything to me. Mr. Crawford made sure Dad was evaluated by 2 different doctors who confirmed he had testamentary capacity, understanding fully what he was doing. Dad even wrote a letter of explanation stating, "I leave my estate to Michael because he has been my caregiver, my companion, and my true son in action, not just in name. David and Linda have their own lives and resources. Michael sacrificed for me, and I want to ensure his family is cared for." Dad's condition worsened through 2022 and early 2023. There were good days and bad days. On bad days, he didn't recognize us. On good days, he was still my dad, telling old stories, giving advice. David and Linda rarely visited. Maybe 4 times the entire 2 years Dad lived with us. Each time they'd ask me to leave the room to have private time with Dad, which I always allowed. In August 2023, Dad passed away peacefully in his sleep. Despite everything, it destroyed me. He was my father, my friend. The funeral was tense. David and Linda barely spoke to me. 1 week later, the will was read, and 2 weeks after that, I was served with a lawsuit. Their case was strong, at least on paper. They had witnesses, Dad's old neighbors who said they rarely saw David and Linda because Michael kept them away. They had a statement from a former nurse who said, "I controlled all of Dad's communications." They even had testimony from distant relatives who claimed Dad had told them years ago he wanted to split everything equally, which I supposedly changed. The depositions were brutal. David's lawyer, Brennan, was ruthless. "Isn't it true you moved your father into your home to control him? Isn't it true you intercepted calls from your siblings? Isn't it convenient that the will was changed right after he was diagnosed with dementia?" I answered honestly every time, but I could see how it looked. Son moves in vulnerable father, isolates him, changes the will, benefits entirely. The months dragged on. Discovery, more depositions, expert testimonies. They hired a psychologist who opined that based on medical records, Dad likely lacked full capacity when he signed the 2021 will. Our expert disagreed, but it was dueling experts. David and Linda played the victims perfectly in depositions, crying about how Dad had been stolen from them, how they missed him so much, how they just wanted what was fair. The money from the estate was frozen pending litigation. I had to pay Elizabeth out of pocket, draining our savings. The stress was killing me. Sarah was supportive but worried. "What if we lose everything? What if we end up owing them money? I couldn't sleep. I lost 15 pounds. My teaching suffered. But I had something they didn't know about. 3 months before Dad passed, during one of his lucid periods, he called me into his room. "Michael, I know what's coming. I know David and Linda will fight the will. I've been around long enough to know how people are." He handed me a small digital voice recorder. "I've been recording something for you. Keep this safe. If they challenge the will, give it to your lawyer. It's the truth, my truth." I had given that recorder to Elizabeth during our first meeting. She listened to it, and her eyes widened. "Michael, this is everything. But I want to save it. I want them to build their entire case, to commit to their narrative completely, and then we'll destroy it with your father's own words." It was risky, but she was confident. The trial was set for April 15, 2024. Harris County Probate Court, Judge Margaret Chen presiding. She was known as brilliant, fair, and no-nonsense. Both sides presented opening arguments. Brennan painted me as a calculating manipulator who took advantage of a sick old man. Elizabeth painted me as a devoted son who honored his father's wishes. Over 3 days they presented their case. The neighbors testified about how they never saw David and Linda. On cross-examination, Elizabeth got them to admit they also rarely interacted with Dad themselves and had no actual knowledge of what happened inside our home. The nurse testified about my control, but Elizabeth revealed she'd been fired for stealing medication and had an axe to grind. The distant relatives testified about Dad's supposed wishes from years ago, but couldn't provide any documentation. Their star witness was a geriatric psychiatrist, Dr. Harold Bennett, who reviewed Dad's medical records and testified that in his opinion, Dad's Alzheimer's diagnosis meant he progressively lost capacity and by March 2021 likely could not make complex decisions about estate planning. It was damaging. I watched the judge taking notes, her expression unreadable. Then it was our turn. Elizabeth called Dad's actual doctor, Dr. Susan Martinez, who had treated him for 5 years. She testified that while Dad had early Alzheimer's, he had significant lucid periods, and in March 2021, absolutely had capacity to make informed decisions about his estate. She brought medical records showing Dad's cognitive tests from that period, which showed mild impairment but retained decision-making capacity. Elizabeth called the attorney who drafted the will, James Crawford, who testified that he spent 2 hours with Dad, asked extensive questions to ensure he understood what he was doing, and was completely satisfied. Dad was of sound mind and acting freely. She called the 2 independent witnesses who were present at the signing, both retired professionals with no stake in the outcome, who confirmed Dad was coherent, clear, and determined. Then Elizabeth called me. I testified for 4 hours. I talked about every doctor's appointment, every meal I cooked, every conversation we had. I explained that I never prevented David and Linda from visiting. They just didn't want to. I showed phone records proving I never blocked their calls. I showed calendars where I'd invited them to family dinners and they'd declined. Brennan cross-examined me aggressively, but I had documentation for everything. After my testimony on the 4th day of trial, Elizabeth said, "Your Honor, the defense has one final piece of evidence. A recording made by Robert Patterson himself, 3 months before his death, during a lucid period, specifically for the purpose of explaining his testamentary decisions. We'd like to play it for the court." Brennan jumped up. "Objection. We haven't been provided this recording in discovery." Elizabeth calmly responded, "It was listed in our evidence inventory as voice recording by decedent. Counsel had the opportunity to request it. We're presenting it now." Judge Chen reviewed her notes. "It's listed. Objection overruled. Let's hear it." Elizabeth placed the small digital recorder on the evidence table, connected it to the courtroom's audio system. The room went completely silent, and then my father's voice filled the room. Weak, a bit shaky, but unmistakably him and unmistakably coherent. "My name is Robert James Patterson. Today is May 12th, 2023. I'm recording this because I know my time is short, and I know my son David and daughter Linda are going to cause problems when I'm gone. I want to make something very clear. I am of sound mind as I record this. Michael is sitting outside my room. He doesn't know I'm doing this. I wanted it to be just me, speaking my truth. There was a pause, the sound of him adjusting in his chair. David and Linda were frozen, pale. Dad's voice continued. I had 3 children. I loved all of them when they were young. But love from a parent and love returned from a child are different things. David, you were always ambitious, always chasing the next deal, the next success. I was proud of you, but son, you only came around when you needed something. When you wanted me to invest in your ventures. When you needed to impress a client by bringing around your old man. When I got sick, you called it an inconvenience. I heard you tell your wife I was becoming a burden. I saw David's jaw clench. The judge was leaning forward, listening intently. Dad continued. Linda, my baby girl, you were always sweet to my face. But you only saw me as a bank and a babysitter. Every visit came with a request for money or a favor. When I said I needed help after my second heart attack, you said you were too busy with the kids. But you had time to ask me for $20,000 for your kitchen renovation a month later. Linda was crying, but they weren't sympathetic tears. Dad's voice grew stronger. And then there's Michael, my youngest. The one I worried about because he chose teaching over money. But Michael, son, you showed me what it really means to be a child. You were at every hospital visit. You changed your whole life to take care of me. You brought me into your home with your young family and you never once complained. You didn't do it for money. You did it out of love. Sarah and your kids treated me like family, not an obligation. My eyes were filled with tears. Sarah, sitting behind me, was crying too. Dad continued. I want to address the will directly. David, Linda, if you're hearing this, it means you've challenged it like I knew you would. You're probably claiming I wasn't in my right mind or Michael manipulated me. That's bull. I made this decision completely on my own. Mr. Crawford will tell you I insisted on it. The doctors will tell you I was capable. I'm telling you now, I left everything to Michael because he earned it. Not through manipulation, but through years of love and sacrifice. There was another pause. I could hear him breathing, gathering strength. Then, I kept something from all of you, something I'm going to reveal now because it proves everything I'm saying. For the past 2 years since I moved in with Michael, I've been recording conversations. Not all the time, but important ones, especially the visits from David and Linda. Michael doesn't know about this. I did it because I wanted proof of who you really are. My head snapped up. What? Elizabeth looked at me, equally surprised. Dad's voice continued. On the recorder Michael has in a separate folder he hasn't seen yet, there are 12 recordings, 12 visits from David and Linda over 2 years. In every single one, you asked about my assets, about my will, about making sure things were fair. David, you specifically told me 3 times I should change my will to split everything equally because it's what Mom would have wanted. You tried to guilt me using your dead mother. David's lawyer was frantically whispering to him. Dad's voice continued, stronger now, almost angry. Linda, you were worse. You brought your husband twice to discuss my finances and suggest I give you money now while I was alive, so you could invest it better than Michael ever could. You said Michael was wasting my money on my care when I should be in a cheap facility so there'd be more left over for you. Linda had her face in her hands. Judge Chen's expression had gone from neutral to stern. Dad continued. But the worst was Christmas 2022, my last Christmas. You both came over. Michael and Sarah made this beautiful dinner. The kids were so happy. And when Michael went to the kitchen, you two cornered me in the living room. David, you said, Dad, you know Michael is just doing this for your money, right? He's never cared about you. He's planning to put you in a home the second the will is secure. Linda, you said, Daddy, we love you. We want you to come live with me, but only if you promise to be fair in the will. My stomach turned. I remembered that Christmas. I remembered David and Linda insisting on private time with Dad. I thought they were just bonding. Dad's voice was shaking now with emotion. I told you both to leave. You refused until Michael came back. I couldn't tell him what you'd said because I didn't want to ruin his Christmas. But I made a decision that day. You would never see a penny from me. The recordings are proof that you're the manipulators. You're the ones who tried to influence me. And you failed. The recording continued with specific details about each visit, times, dates, what was said. Dad had documented everything. He concluded, "To the judge hearing this, I beg you to honor my wishes. Michael deserves this inheritance. He earned it with love. David and Linda deserve nothing but the truth about themselves. To Michael, son, I'm sorry you have to go through this, but you've always been strong. Take care of your family with this money. Make your kids' lives easier like you made mine. I love you, son. I always have. Signed, Robert James Patterson." The recording ended. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Judge Chen looked at Elizabeth. "Counselor, you mentioned additional recordings?" Elizabeth nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. 12 recordings referenced by Mr. Patterson, documenting interactions with the contestants over 2 years. We have them all, time-stamped and authenticated. We can present them if needed." Judge Chen looked at David and Linda, then at their lawyer. "Mr. Brennan, does your client wish to respond to this?" Brennan was white as a sheet. He leaned over to David and Linda, whispering urgently. David was shaking his head. Linda was sobbing. After a long moment, Brennan stood up. "Your Honor, we request a recess to confer with our clients." Judge Chen's voice was ice. "Denied. Mr. Patterson's voice from beyond the grave has accused your clients of the exact behavior they've accused his son of. He's offered specific evidence. I want to hear their response now." David stood up, shaking. "Your Honor, our father." He was confused. He didn't understand. Judge Chen cut him off. "Mr. Patterson, I've just listened to 7 minutes of your father speaking with perfect clarity, perfect recall, specific dates and details. Are you claiming he was confused?" David sat down. Linda tried. "Your Honor, we loved our father." Judge Chen interrupted. "I'm sure you did. But the evidence before me shows that love was conditional on financial benefit. I'm going to make a ruling now, and it's going to be clear." She organized her notes, put on her reading glasses, and began. "I've presided over probate disputes for 15 years. I've seen family greed, manipulation, and deception, but rarely have I seen a case where the truth was so clearly documented by the deceased himself. Robert Patterson was not a confused old man. He was a father who saw his children for exactly who they were. The will dated March 2021 is valid. It was executed with proper formalities, with testamentary capacity confirmed by multiple medical professionals and legal counsel. The recordings presented today provide clear evidence that the decedent's wishes were genuine and free from undue influence by Michael Patterson." She looked directly at David and Linda. "Furthermore, the evidence suggests that if anyone attempted undue influence, it was the contestants themselves. While I cannot make criminal findings in this proceeding, I can and do find that this will contest was brought in bad faith. Therefore, I rule as follows. The will is upheld in its entirety. Michael Patterson is the sole beneficiary of Robert Patterson's estate. Additionally, under Texas Estates Code Section 27, Therefore, the contestants David Patterson and Linda Peterson are ordered to pay all attorney's fees and court costs incurred by the estate in defending this action, as this contest was brought with no reasonable cause and in bad faith." Brennan tried to object, but Judge Chen held up her hand. "I'm not finished. I am also referring this matter to the State Bar for investigation into whether counsel had a good faith basis to bring this action. This case wasted court resources and put a grieving son through unnecessary trauma. We're adjourned." The gavel came down. David and Linda were destroyed. Brennan was packing his briefcase in a hurry, furious. Elizabeth hugged me. "We did it, Michael. Your father did it." I couldn't speak. I just sat there crying, wishing Dad could know that his voice had been heard. The aftermath was swift. David and Linda's attorney's fees came to over $180,000, plus our fees of $95,000, all of which they had to pay. They tried to appeal, but it was denied. The recordings Dad made were released as part of public record. The local news picked it up. Man vindicates son from beyond the grave. It went viral. David and Linda were humiliated publicly. I never spoke to them again. Not at the final hearing when the estate was distributed, not when I had to collect personal items from their possession. They're dead to me, as I apparently was to them once the money was gone. With the inheritance, Sarah and I paid off our mortgage, set up college funds for Emma and Jake, and I donated $100,000 to Alzheimer's research in Dad's name. We also established a scholarship at my high school for students pursuing teaching, called the Robert Patterson Service Over Self Scholarship. But the most important thing the money gave me was peace. Peace knowing my father saw me, appreciated me, and made sure the world knew the truth. That recording wasn't just evidence. It was his final gift to me. His final act of protection. Even in death, he was taking care of his son. If you made it to the end of this story, I need to tell you something. Family isn't always blood. Family is who shows up, who sacrifices, who loves without conditions. And if you're fighting for what's right, against people who claim to love you but only love what you can give them, keep fighting. The truth has a way of coming out. If this story moved you in any way, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And leave in the comments. Have you experienced family betrayal? Let's build a support network here. Stay strong, and see you in the next video.